Welcome back to St Anne's here in Higher Openshaw. This podcast is a podcast that's been done for me by Chris Robson. He is a speaker we've had this weekend at the parish, speaking on behalf of Aid to the Church in Need. So I'm now going to hand over to Chris, who is going to explain a little bit about the history, the formation and the work that the Aid to the Church in Need does. So thanks, Chris.
Aid to the Church in Need was founded in 1947 by Father Werenfried van Straten, who was worried about German refugees in West Germany, people who'd come from the Soviet zone, and somehow he had to house them and find families to look after them, especially young people and children. And of course in Belgium and Holland, helping German young people after the Second World War wasn't very popular. But he stuck at it, and he helped a lot of these people who were homeless find homes and families who would, in an interim period, actually look after them. But what Father Werenfried was interested in as a priest was another issue as well, which was, how do I help Catholics in the communist-occupied parts of Eastern Europe? And this caused him to think, and he set up an organization called Ostpriesterhilfe, which means in German, the help for priests in the East. And he sent them help in the form of bicycles so they could get around their parishes. And later he sent them the help in the form of motor cars, the Volkswagen. Anyway, his work continued. And before long, he was helping Polish Catholic communities, Ukrainian Greek Rite Uniate Catholic communities, and Russian Orthodox Christians as well. And all these people were suffering from Soviet oppression. People were being whisked off to labor camps and prison camps if they were Christians. And many people were being killed in an overt way and sometimes in covert ways as well. So the church was being severely persecuted. Many people would say, and many people said at the time, that Father Werenfried's work was a waste of time, that it wasn't going to lead to anything. But in fact, when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, we find that the seminaries in the Ukraine, in Poland and Russia are now full of young men training for the priesthood. And in fact, far from being futile and pointless, the work of Father Werenfried has enormously enhanced and increased the life and the vigour of the churches as they emerge from decades of persecution. Well, what of Father Werenfried's work now? He died in 2008 as a man of nearly 90. His life was full of merit and good works, and some people say he should be beatified and brought to the altars of the Church. He was a close friend of Pope John Paul II, and in fact helped him a lot to extend a lifeline to Catholics in Poland in the 1970s and 1980s. Well, the answer is that Father Werenfried's work goes on, but not just in Eastern Europe anymore. His work to help persecuted Catholics continues, but the Catholics that his organisation, Aid to the Church in Need, as it was called in English, or Aide à l'Église en détresse, as it was called in French, continues mainly with African Catholics and with Asian Catholics. To take Africa first, there is much criminal violence against Nigerian priests and the Nigerian laity. There have been bombs placed in churches while Mass was being said once recently on Christmas Day, and many people, including small children, were killed. We are trying to help the Nigerian church in its missionary work, and we're trying to give it the moral and spiritual support that it needs at this difficult time, ensuring, of course, through the Nigerian bishops that it remains true to the teaching of the Church, which is very evidently the case. And also our work continues in China, where to be a Catholic is to be a second-class citizen. But the Church in China, even after the vicious persecution of the 1960s, which is a long time ago now, is still under a shadow. If you're a Catholic in Beijing or Shanghai, you find it difficult to get to Mass. You're watched by the authorities at Mass in various deniable ways. And it's still very much a burden for you and your family if you insist on practicing the Catholic faith. In spite of all that, the Church is prospering, and we are helping the Church in China. There are difficulties in northeast India where Catholics have been persecuted. Many of them are Dalits, from the untouchable castes, according to the Hindus, and have converted to Catholicism and other forms of Christianity, and they are being often badly treated, in spite, one has to add, of certain efforts by the government in New Delhi to make sure there's some measure of fairness in how citizens of all religious beliefs are treated. In Pakistan, the Catholic minority is under very severe pressure. Many Catholics have been murdered and certainly been at the receiving end of criminal violence. The seminary in Karachi is surrounded by a high-security fence, and the Bishop of Faisalabad, Joseph Coates, has presided at the funeral on one occasion of 30 people who were murdered, Christians whose lives had been taken. Right across the Middle East, Catholics and other Christians are in grave difficulties. In Iraq, the Christian community, which used to number 1 million, is now down to a couple of 100,000, and many have been forced to leave their homes by terrorist groups. It's difficult for Catholics in Syria. It's not normally realized that nearly half the refugees in Jordan from Syria are actually Christians and have fled cities like Aleppo and Damascus. For Coptic Catholics in Egypt, things are very tricky and difficult. And even in Lebanon, which has a strong Christian Maronite minority which is in communion with the Holy See, there are grave problems which Catholics face. How are we in Aid to the Church in Need helping? Well, we help only through the Catholic bishops. But the Catholic bishops don't actually get any assistance from us and from you, our benefactors, unless they've done their homework and they know exactly how the money is going to be spent, and they've costed it. One of the things we're doing rather a lot of is rebuilding churches and parish centres which have been firebombed or even subjected to explosive devices. And this rebuilding program can be very expensive, but is vital for the survival of the Christian communities. So it seems hopeless, really, when we look at all the facts and indicators, but by the grace of God, we hope that what happened in Russia and Eastern Europe, the resurrection of the church against all the odds, will also happen in the Middle East, and the church will have a calming influence, a moderating influence, a peacemaking influence in an area of severe conflict. And remember that the groups we're helping are loyal to their own countries, believe in mainstream democratic values, uphold the values of international law. That doesn't mean they're not being treated appallingly on occasions, but their values are mainstream and moderate and are above all non-violent. And that, I think, has to be emphasized. If you do want to help, then do get in touch with Aid to the Church in Need, which has a head office in Sutton, Sutton, in Surrey, and you can find details about it either from directory inquiries, whichever service you use, or on our website, the Aid to the Church in Need website, which is available for anybody who has access to a computer or a laptop.
So you can see in many ways that, there are still huge pockets around the world where it's still quite dangerous to be a Catholic. And there is great persecution going on in many, many parts of the world. So we thank God that here in our own society, we are free from that kind of fear, that we are able to worship God freely and without any kind of, compromise to our safety. So I'd like to thank Chris for his input today. And as always, I ask your prayers. If you can't support financially, of course, your spiritual support for all the work that's done by the Aid to the Church in Need would be gratefully appreciated. The power of prayer links God's holy family, and it's one of those things that everyone can do. So thanks for your time for listening, and thanks to Chris for his input today.